So, hello everyone. Here I am with your seventh chapter, that is crash recovery and backup. What do you mean by recovery? So, the recovery means if you are deleting something from your mobile, like if you are deleting some photos from the camera, and whatever deleted memory is there, it goes into your trash memory, and when you want to again see that photo, you have to recover that photo. Means if you click on that photo, you will go to the recover section, sorry, that is known as recovery. So database of process of restoring the database to a correct state in the event of failure. If some failure occurs or if something happens to the database, it comes again into the same condition as it was before, is known as recovery. The process of restoring the database to the most recent consistent state that existed shortly before the time of the system failure. So in this it is given that of the system failure. So what do you mean by system failure? If you're doing something on your laptop or in your mobile phone, and immediately it gets off or it gets switched off, or it falls from your hand and it gets switched off. So whatever things you are doing, like on your PC, if you're doing something and you have not saved it in your laptop, and you have not saved it, and immediately your laptop gets off, so when you charge it up, it will again go to the same consistent state where it was, because you have not locked that system. It has been locked by the system failure. So whatever work you were doing on the last minute, that will again restore, and that will be your last position where you are working. That is known as database recovery. There are different recovery techniques based on the atomicity property. So as I've told in the first chapter, that is acid property. What do you mean by atomicity? Atomicity means the process takes place, means the process exactly takes place, it completes its work, or else it don't complete it work at all, is known as atomicity. So when the system failure comes or anything happens in between of the system failure, if you are working on something, it goes to the atomicity property. Means it completes it works, it save it, or else it goes to the same state where it was left, is known as database recovery. So what do you mean by database backup? So backup means what? You are creating a copy of the database or an of a data which you currently have in your system. For example, if I am having my photos in my gallery, what I will do, I will back up it into my pen drive or in my laptop, or I will store another copy of it into different devices or on the drive also. That is known as backup. Some data DBMS provides functions that allows administrators to schedule atomic backup to secondary storage devices on tapes, CDs, disks, etc. For example, whenever you click photos from your camera, that gets stored into your gallery. The same things goes and gets stored into your Google Photos. That is known as backup. I mean, it stores the another copy of your data automatically. Okay, that is known as database backup. So here are the classifications, failure of classification in DBMS. There are different failures. There are three main failures, that is transaction failure, system crash, and data transfer failure. So what do you mean by transaction failure? That is logical error or system error. For example, if you are sending money to someone by Google Pay or Phone Pay, and immediately it just goes on processing, and after you take back, it will again go to the processing state, but for some reason, and afterwards it will go to a failed state. That is known as an logical error. Means whatever transaction you are doing, it doesn't happens or it gets stops because of some issues is known as logical error. System crash, power cut. As I've told, if you are doing on your PC, so if it light goes, your PC will be off, and whatever you are doing, you have to restart the process again. That is known as system crash. So bugs are there because of operating system, hardware manipulation. Like for example, if I want to take the printout but my printer is not working, that is also an error. Operating system error, for example, your mobile phone get hang and you can't do any work on it, is also known as operating system error, means system crash. The next is data transfer failure, disk head crash, disk unreachability, format of bad sectors. For example, here we go, like uh, before all this pen drive came and all, we were using CDs. Okay, that time if you put the CDs, the CD was going blank or something, and you again clean it and again put it, so some errors must be coming into it, is known as CD head crash. Disk unreachability. CD head crash means it's not working at all if you put into the system CD, so that is known as disk drive. For example, your pen drive also, so if you insert your pen drive into your system but it is not reaching or it can't read the data from your pen drive, that is also known as a disk head crash. Bad sector also means sometimes there are bugs which where you can't read that data, that is also known as a data transfer failure. Sometimes you can't transfer the data from one system to another. Okay, so these are the different types of failures. That is, first one will be transaction failure, second is system crash, and third is data transfer failure. So here I have given it into a deeper sense, and I have told you what it means. Logical error means when a transaction cannot complete because it has some code error or something. Like if you have seen in coding language also, if you have a semicolon left into your code and it gives you an error, that is known as an logical error. System error, when the database system itself terminates an active transaction because the DBMS is not able to execute it, is known as a system error. Means because of some system failure you can't do your process. For example, if you don't have enough of memory into your phone and you have to download something, so that goes to a system failure. So system crash, as I've told, that external whatever system what external failure whatever happens is known as system crash. Disk failure, your disk can't be read, or some failure into your disk. Types of DBMS failures, hardware failure and software failure. As I've told about the printer, if your printer is not good you can't take a printout, that is known as a hardware failure. Software failure means sometimes what happens, you have seen Hotstar and all, if you open it, it immediately get closed because of some logical errors inside or some issues into your operating system. That happens, the software failures do take place. Okay, sometimes your WhatsApp also can't recognize your finger lock, so that is known as a software failure. System crash, the same, if your system gets closed, if some deadlock happens or your main memory is lost, that is known as system crash. Network failures also take place for example, if you are communicating with someone, if you are calling someone and he is not in a proper network area, so you can't talk to them properly, you can't hear their voice, you can't talk to them. It happens with your message sending also. What happens with me is when I enter into my lift, my building's lift, I can't get a call or my range system goes off, that is known as a network failure. Media failure. Due to the head crashes or unreadable media resulting in the loss of the part of the secondary storage. Media failure means what? For example, if I am sending some data with the help of WhatsApp or with the help of email or something, some things can't get received from the another person. If I'm sending with share it or share me, nowadays it has came share me, and it can't take your data, that is known as media failure. Application software failure, logical error that occurs one or more transactions to fail. Yes, if you are opening your, as I've told, Hotstar 2 to 3 times but still it is getting closed, that is known as application software failure. Natural physical disaster, failure like fire, flood, earthquake or power failure is known as natural physical disaster. Carelessness, unintentional destruction of data, means unintentionally something happens with you or with your data is known as carelessness. Sabotage, intentional corruption, means intentionally you are destroying someone's phone, someone's data is known as sabotage. The next is recovery and atomicity. As I've told, what is the recovery? Recovery is restoring the data to the correct state as it was before, is known as recovery. And atomicity, the transaction takes place fully or it does not takes place at all, is known as atomicity. So when a DBMS recovers from a crash, it should maintain the following things. It should check the state of all the transactions which were being executed. Yes, when it recovers the process from last failure, it checks all the transaction where it was being executed, how it was there and in which state it was there. So in the second or third chapter we will see what are the states of transaction. That time you will know what is the states of transaction. A transaction may be in the middle of some operations. The DBMS must ensure the atomicity of the transaction in their case. Yes, in which state, in which middle of some operation your transaction is there, you should check it. It should check whether the transaction can be completed now or it needs to be rolled back. Yes, when there is lot of processing time required when you are sending money, you should know that when to stop your transaction or when to end your transaction or when to roll back your transaction. Means for example, if I am telling all my secrets to my friend but my friend is telling my secrets to someone else, means if there is some process after that कि yes, अगर मुझे पता चला कि मेरा दोस्त ऐसे कर रहा है तो I'll stop sharing, I'll stop roll backing my process. That is known as roll backing. No transaction should be allowed to leave the DBMS in an inconsistent state. Yes, in the halfly done stage, it should not remain in the halfly done state, and you should take the responsibility if it is doing the transaction, means the database. So transaction should be allowed. No transaction should be allowed to leave the transaction in inconsistent state or in the middle point of the transaction. The next is checkpoint. Checkpoint is the mechanism where all the previous logs are removed from the system and stored permanently in a storage disk. Yes, when you are doing the process, there is a buffer memory created for every process. Okay, if I am sending the money to someone, what it will do, it will take that data from your bank account and store in the buffer memory. And if I want to send 100 rupees to someone and I have 200 into my account, so what it will do, it will store 200 into buffer memory minus 100 from the buffer memory data, and whatever processing is done, whatever data is minused from the amount which I have in the bank, that will reflect into the buffer memory, and after the process or transaction is completed or transaction is successful, that buffer memory is copied to the main memory or a permanent memory, that is known as checkpoint. Checkpoint declares a point before which the DBMS was in consistent state and all the transactions were committed. It checks whether in what state the database or transaction is there, and it commits all the transaction if it successfully takes place. While the execution of the transaction, such checkpoints are marked and the transaction is executed, then using the steps of the transaction, the log files will be created. Yes, the logs file will be created, whatever transaction is done. Log files means the history of the transaction is known as log file. See, T1, T2, T3, T4 and the failure and the time. Yes, this is the checkpoint which has completed the transaction. T1 is in the process, T3 is in the process and T4 goes to the failure state, is known as checkpoint with failure. Recovery system. The recovery system reads log file from the end to start to read logs files from T4 to T1. End to start means from T4 to from down to upwards. It checks from the last transaction to first transaction. Recovery system maintain two lists, a redo list and an undo list. Yes, redo list means if you want to do the transaction again and again, it will go to the redo list, and if you want to stop the transaction, it will go to undo list. The transaction is put into redo state if the recovery system sees a log with tn start, yes, and tn commit. Yes, if the transaction goes to start and commit state, it will redo the process. Shadow paging. Shadow paging is a recovery technique that is used to recover database. In this recovery technique, database is considered as made up of fixed size of logical units of storage which are referred as pages. So yes, see the shadow paging. The shadow paging means there are different blocks or different pages where it will current page table are updated. Yes, whatever updations are done, it is done in the current page, and whatever the shadow pages is there means it will if the database disk block is having the data, it will reflect to the current page, means the buffer memory as I have told, and then after whatever data is reflected into the buffer memory, means that is current page, and after updating, and that will reflect to the main memory and it will store to the main memory, that will reflect to the main memory. From buffer memory to the main memory means whatever data you are having or whatever process you are doing, it will firstly reflect to the buffer memory and then the main memory. Concept of shadow paging. Page is a segment of memory. Yes, page is a block of memory where you can store the data. Page table is an index of the pages. Each table entry point to a page on the disk. Two page tables are used during the life of the transaction. The current page table and the shadow page table. Shadow page table is a copy of the current page table. Yes, whatever the current data is there, it is the shadow. It is the shadow means it is reflected. Whatever buffer memory is copied here and whatever changes are done, it will go to the shadow pages and then it will reflect to the database disk blocks. When a transaction starts, both the tables look identical. The current table is updated for each write operation. The shadow page is never changed during the life of the transaction. When the current transaction is committed, the shadow page entry becomes a copy of the current table. Entry in the disk blocks with the old data is released. The shadow page table is stored into non-volatile memory. If the system crash occurs, then the shadow page table is copied to the current page table. So I'll again explain it. जो मेमोरी होती है हमारी मेन मेमोरी, दैट इज़ अ डेटाबेस डिस्क ब्लॉक, तो उसका डेटा जो भी होता है वो करंट पेज में कॉपी होता है. ओके, जो भी करंट पेज में अपडेट्स होंगे वो क्या होगा, वो किस में जाएगा, शैडो पेजिंग में जाएगा, मीन्स द कॉपी ऑफ द करंट पेज। और शैडो पेज का जो भी मेमोरी होगा वो रिफ्लेक्ट होगा डेटाबेस डिस्क ब्लॉक विच इज द मेन memory. So full backup. What do you mean by full backup? A full backup is the most complete type of backup where you clone all the selected data. Yes, full backup means whatever you are selecting, whatever you want to have the backup of, you are selecting and storing that data into a different memory is known as full backup. This includes file folders and SaaS application, hard drives and more. Yes, hard drives and more, like pen drive is there, your Google Drive is there, your softwares are there. So you can have a selected amount of complete data backup is known as full backup. The drawback in that every backup run requires some serious energy in light of the fact that whole rundown of the document is replicable once more. Yes, whatever data is backup, it should have or it should be maintained also. Entire data sets regardless of any previous backup of circumstances. Differential backups. A differential backup straddles the line between a full and an incremental backup. This type of backup involves backing up the data that was created or changed since the last full backup. Yes, differential data means all the time or whatever data you have backup, again sometimes you will do some different backups. So increasable and changing of full backup is known as differential backup. It lets you restore data faster than full backup since it requires only two backup components, an initial full backup and the latest differential backup. Whatever means if I have the data, so it can be divided with the recent and lastly done backup. So you can do it immediately or you can do it fast in a faster way, and you can get it into a faster way also. Differential backup additional and the alterations since the most recent backup. Next is incremental backup. The first backup in an incremental backup is a full backup. The succeeding backup will only store changes that were made to the previous backup. Means incremental backup means if I am having the previous data, I will increase the data into that current data only. That is known as incremental backup. Incremental backup requires space to store only the changes, which allows the lightning fast backup. Yes, it only takes the addition of the data. It does not give any different type of data. It gives you an increment into your backup. Means updation of the data is known as increment of the data. So here we complete with our 7th chapter, which is very short and sweet, and as there are only two concepts, that is recovery and backup, so it's very easy to learn. Just go through what it is, and if you learn with the definition and if you get understand, you can write into a paper. So thank you and stay tuned for the next and subscribe.